And to trending now, and speaking of exactly that, you know, if you do question what is unquestionably the worst government in Australia, if you do ask the Premier of Victoria questions like, you know, why can't you tell us when you first knew that the coronavirus had got out of your quarantine hotels? The abuse you get, not from the Premier, but from the public. You ask the Australian's reporter, Rachel Baxendale, what she has copped since last week for asking questions like that at a press conference that went to air has been incredible. And she's tweeted, I'm thick-skinned and I'm not going to let a bunch of awful trolls who don't know me get the better of me. But I'd be lying and letting others who experience similar down if I'd said that the kinds of messages I've received in the past couple of days don't have an impact. And she's done a whole string of tweets that suggests to me she has been hurt. Joining me is Daisy Cousins, a YouTube star with her own video channel, not unaccustomed to getting abuse, particularly from the left, of course. Daisy, thanks for joining me. How bad was that abuse that Rachel copped?
Well, it was so bad, Andrew, that Rachel actually received a tip-off from the Victorian Health Minister that it actually included death threats. You know, death threats for doing nothing other than her job, which was asking, you know, Daniel Andrews questions about the coronavirus, and very sensible questions. She said there were 5 questions in total that seemed to really incite these people, and she's put them all on Twitter. I've read them. There's nothing out of the ordinary. They're perfectly fair. They've got an edge, and they are critical of the Victorian government. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, the sort of political tension this issue in Victoria has caused. But one thing I found very interesting in this thread was that she made the point of saying that while there were, you know, a lot of men who were taking part in these attacks, she said a high proportion of those attacking her appeared to be women. And even though they were women, these women seemed to have more of an issue with Rachel and her female counterparts asking questions than they did with her male counterparts asking questions. Now, I can speak from extensive personal experience here, Andrew, when I can say this is just another thing that proves that the sisterhood is a myth. It is a huge myth, especially on the internet. And what a lot of people don't seem to realise is that a very large chunk of what the left, feminists, lady feminists on the left call online misogyny actually comes from other women. And again, from my experience, more often than not, that online misogyny comes from women of the left directed at right-wing women, and these are left-wing women who would absolutely decry the same kind of abuse as the worst kind of abuse and misogyny if it was directed at them or at other left-wing women that they like. But because I don't even know Rachel's political affiliation, but she works for The Australian, and of course The Australian is, you know, part of News Corp, which on Twitter is considered public enemy #1 by the regressive left. I mean, the stuff they say about News Corp is right up there with sort of tinfoil hat conspiracy theory time. It's really quite extraordinary, and as we've seen, a lot of it comes from women. And so my feeling here, Andrew, is that if you are a feminist and you are a woman and you go on and on about how, you know, you're a warrior fighting against the abuse of women online, well, you can't just turn around and then abuse women online. You know, it sort of doesn't work. So I feel very sorry for Rachel. I really feel for her.
To back you up, I just say 2 words, Clementine Ford. What I don't get, though, is why people are so threatened and so angry and vicious about people that are asking questions about mistakes made that now threaten the whole country. I mean, you know, the Prime Minister now is saying that I'm hideous and amoral, but the abuse of Rachel simply for asking questions. I wonder what's going on here. What is this sensitivity?
It's very bizarre, isn't it? I mean, the virus has been made political from the get-go. I noticed that sort of the same group of people who were moralising about climate change and saying it was this great global, you know, existential crisis suddenly switched to the coronavirus when that sort of came into vogue, and they directed all their moralising there. You know, if you don't wear a mask or you don't believe in lockdown, then you hate grannies and you want old people to die. You know, they directed their moralising there. So it became political in a broad sense quite early on, sort of part of the culture war. But recently there's been this phenomenon that's sort of particular to Victoria amongst the online masses, and it's a faction of Twitter that they're what you'd call sort of Daniel disciples. They seem to be so committed to Daniel Andrews that any kind of hint that he is one iota less than perfect is a terrible, heinous sin, and you can't say it, and you're going to be attacked to your very grave, as Rachel experienced, because you've dared to suggest that Daniel Andrews is not doing a 100% brilliant job. It's like they see Daniel Andrews as a kind of Jesus figure who's sort of been sent down from heaven to help defeat the coronavirus. It's weird. I've not seen anything like it before.
I think that's right. I think there's this desperate search for a security, a big daddy, you know. He'll save us, even if he's leading you over a cliff. They still cling to his ankles, you know, don't leave us. And I think that's, it's a sort of messiah search or something. It's really quite medieval. It's quite weird. Now, I'm stunned, just switching topics quickly, I'm stunned always by the racism of the left. You know, so many of the left think they're not racist, but again and again show they are by being patronising or generalising and all that kind of stuff. The latest example, Joe Biden, the US Democrat presidential nominee, here he is last Wednesday talking to a meeting of black and Hispanic journalists. Have a listen.
By the way, what you all know, but most people don't know, unlike the African-American community, with notable exceptions, the Latino community is an incredibly diverse community with incredibly different attitudes about different things.
Daisy, do blacks all look the same to you too?
Oh my gosh, Andrew, isn't that just the most awkward thing you've ever heard? And the thing is, even in context, it was awkward. They were discussing sort of attitudes to immigration, and it still came across as if he was depicting African Americans as a kind of ideological monolith. And even though Biden posted a very heartfelt, vehement apology on Twitter, you know, saying, oh, I didn't mean to depict them as a monolith. That's kind of how it came out. And it's not the only time that Biden has sort of posited this sort of, I guess, bigotry of low expectations. There was an incident a few weeks ago. He did an interview with a black podcaster called Charlemagne the Great. And Biden said, verbatim, if you are black and you're thinking of voting for Trump, then you ain't black. As if somehow if you're black but you don't vote Democrat, there's something wrong with you and you're not black enough. And this coming from a white man. So it's very revealing.
There's your explanation, Daisy. There's your explanation. If you say that anyone who's black and votes Conservatives isn't really black, then of course you believe that only blacks are monolithic, because anyone who isn't subscribing to this ideology ain't black, you know. It's just, oh, my God, the man, to think that he could be president in a few months. Daisy Cousins, thank you so much indeed for your time.
Thank you, Andrew.